script because we are recording this, and it's the monthly call series hosted by the American Bar Association Dispute Resolution Section's Relational Practice Task Force. And I'm Kim Wright. I'm the co-chair of the task force and your host for this call. DG Mon is here, and he is also on the task force. And we especially thank the ABA and Tina Brown for the platform that's made these calls possible. This is actually the last of the series. And recordings of all the previous calls are available on our website, which is relationalpractice.xyz. So in each call, we have a space holder who helps us to ground and reflect. And today we're pleased to have Henry Yampolsky. Did I say it right?
You got it.
In that role. And then each call also features a speaker who serves as a conversation starter. And today we're lucky that we have Rhonda Magee. We're especially lucky to have Rhonda. After Henry sets our space, Rhonda will speak to us for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have time to talk together. And then Henry will close the space and we'll shut off the recording. And after we stop the recording, you're invited to stay and chat for a few minutes after the hour if you have the time, or to leave at the top of the hour if your schedule requires you to be elsewhere. That's a time we can talk about anything, not just the topic of the day. And we want you to be not just listeners, but to actively engage with each other. So before we continue, let's take just a few minutes for a quick introduction for everybody on the call so that Henry and Rhonda will know who's here. Who wants to volunteer? I'm going to call on Duncan. Did I see a hand?
Do you want to call on me?
I'll call on Duncan.
Okay.
You're the first one on my screen.
Okay.
So it's easy to keep track.
So I am Duncan Holloman. I'm a psychotherapist and a recovering lawyer. And I am currently in Hyannis, Massachusetts, looking out over the sand dunes.
Oh, lovely.
Nice.
Welcome.
Indeed. And thank you for doing this, Kim. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. David Levin, you're next. You need to unmute yourself to talk. Oh, we can't hear you. You're muted somehow. How about, do you want me to skip you and come back? Okay. Glenn and Maria.
Yes, hi. Well, your picture just went away, so I hope we're still here. But Glenn and Maria with Four Directions Branding, and so we do authentic brand strategy work with businesses. And this is our first time on this call. We don't really know what it's about, but Kim invited us, so we're here.
Okay, welcome. Joy, you're next.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little echoey, but we can hear you volume-wise.
So my name is Joy Rosenthal, and I do divorce mediation and collaborative practice in New York. It's hot and muggy here today. I'd much rather be in Hyannis looking out at the sea. I found out about this call when I went to the PISLAP conference, and Theresa and I just led a CLE workshop for attorneys on the based on the dignity model that I think was presented by Donna Hicks a few months ago here. So I'm very excited to be here and to say hello to you again. Hello to you again.
Hi, welcome. Joy, you and Theresa may be interested. We're actually having a gathering in Midtown. I'm here on Saturday evening. If you haven't seen that floating around, send me an email and I'll get you the details.
Okay, great. Welcome to New York.
Thanks.
Yeah.
David, are you here?
I'm going to try again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, barely, but we can hear you.
Oh, well, I'm David Levine. I live in Santa Fe. I'm supposed to be retired. I'm an attorney, a mediator, and a trainer of mediators. And here at the invitation of Kim, we presented at the ABA this spring together. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Deborah, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton, and I'm an attorney, recovering mediator. I also train. I also speak all over the world to encourage people to use mediation as a resolution practice for conflicts over animals. I'm an author. I wrote the book Nipped in the Bud, Not in the Butt, to resolve conflicts over animals. And it is my distinct pleasure to be a part of this group.
Thank you. Theresa?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Theresa. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Theresa Calabrese. I'm an LGBTQ mediator and collaborative attorney. And I'm here with my dog. Deb, you'll appreciate that. I don't know if you can see him. So that's why I'm in this, like, it's a little dark where I'm sitting because my dog really enjoys being right with me. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here. I knew about this group through Joy and attended the Dignity workshop that happened a couple of months ago. And I'm totally psyched to be here today. So thanks, everybody.
Welcome. Gail? Oh, you just muted yourself.
Sorry about that. Am I
Okay.
back? Hi, everyone. I'm Gail Silverstein. I am a clinical professor at UC Hastings in San Francisco. I teach 2 clinics. One is a mediation clinic where my students are enrolled as mediators, and I teach mediation to them, and then we practice together. And I also teach a representation clinic where we represent clients in social justice plaintiff side work. I've been on multiple calls this year, and I've expanded my mind and learned a lot. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank Kim and the rest of the group a lot for hosting these calls.
Thanks. It's been a joy. Stewart, you're next on my screen.
Thank you, Kim. Stewart Levine. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I'm actually at an ABA meeting right now, law practice management section in Portland, Maine. And I just came out of a meeting, and it's the perfect example of why relationality is so important. I was just kind of shocked by what happened in this meeting.
Wow.
I am a lawyer in recovery for many, many years. Latest book, okay, Becoming the Best Lawyer You Can Be, how to maintain a guide to physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness that Kim wrote a chapter for, and I'm just very pleased to be here. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. And Stewart, it warms my heart that you're still surprised. Henry, go ahead and introduce yourself as part of the gathering, and then we'll turn it over to you after a few more people introduce themselves. Henry?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. So my name is Henry Yampolsky, and I'm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am the founder and president of Living Peace Institute, which is focused on developing mindful tools for people to learn to respond to conflict with strength, clarity, and ease. So one of the tools I teach is called Dissolving Conflict from Within. I also developed what's called Mindful Mediation curriculum, which incorporates yoga and mindfulness into a regular mediation training. And then in November, I'm taking a group of folks to India in an experience called Radical Peacemaking.
Great, thanks. DG, you're next on my agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everybody. I'm DG Mon. I'm the president of the National Association for Community Mediation. For those who don't know our members, our touchstone is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 10, that talks about access to justice and the need for people to have the ability to resolve their own conflicts. And so our process is to set the safe space and then allow the individuals, encourage individuals to do what we need to have them do what they want to do with their conflict, as opposed to picking a particular method that we're comfortable with and therefore they should be. So I've been excited to be a part of this, blessed to know Kim now for, I think, going on 3 years. And every time I'm with her, she just opens a new layer for me. So this is always excited to be with all of you, and particularly with our friend Kip.
Thank you, DG. Rhonda, the short intro here.
Me? Now?
You.
Hi, everybody. And again, my very humble apologies for missing the top of the hour and coming a little late. So I'm Rhonda Magee, and I'm a tenured full-time law professor at the University of San Francisco. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Kim for seemingly all my life. I can't even remember when we met, but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
You've been at this, yeah. Effort to make lawyering and legal education, and so law practice and legal education both more sustainable, more life affirming, I think, in many ways. So I teach full time classes on torts, classes dealing with race and law, and I co-developed a class called Contemplative Lawyering, which is about bringing mindfulness and compassion practices into a kind of a professional development sort of seminar for mostly graduating law students. And I've just finished my first book, and it is on mindfulness and compassion practices as a support for working around racial justice issues. So I'm happy to say more about that in the Q&A, perhaps if anybody's interested. Happy to be with you.
Yeah. Kathy Clark, you're the next
one up. My name's Kathy Clark. I am a lawyer in California. I live in the East Bay on the other side of the hill from San Francisco. I've known Kim for, God, I don't know, I think 20 years through collaborative law and conflict resolution and restorative practices and many, many other aspects of the law. And she invited me today, and so I'm just here to listen. Thanks.
Welcome, Kathy. Louise! Louise is here.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. So, can you see me?
Half your head.
Half
the
my
top
head,
half.
It's hard to know. I'm out gardening. I am in New Jersey right now with 12 16-year-old boys. My son, they just got out of school yesterday, and they begged me to bring them to the beach. It's a beautiful, rainy, plus 90-degree sun, hot, back and forth kind of day. It's so good to be on this call. I am co-chair of this group with Kim, and just love those who come onto the call. What I do by background, I have been the founder and owner of Baltimore Mediation. We're in our 26th year. We have devoted our practice to dialogue. What would have seemed in the litigation arena, we've believed fervently, oftentimes zigging while other people were zagging, in face-to-face conversation, not separating people, believing that there can be something more important than just a settlement, but rather there can be trust building, there can be relationship deepening, even with enemies. And so our work now, for 20, 25 years, our work was really in the divorce and the business partner and the trust and estates arena. And now I'm really interested in issues that have greater impact, issues of consequence for Americans, and taking a process. I also have a book that ended up doing really well and kind of propelled me into the medical arena and back into the legal arena. And so I'm just really interested in continuing to develop myself internally and to be in deep relationship with those who are similar thinkers, like those on this call and with Kim, and to then really becoming part of something that will be a movement that's already underfoot, that can look at the work that we might do more individually, if you will, or more in our private practices in a way that could have a larger public policy, public stage to really show and teach Americans just how to do deep dialogue, even when there are real differences in how we can move our country forward. So that's really, so it's inside and outside, internal and external. And I'm just delighted to be with you all. And thank you for my perspiring self. And I'm a little muddy from the garden.
Well, thanks for being here, Louise. Susan. You're on mute. You have to.
I'm
Yeah.
unmuting. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many people on the call. And I am in Philadelphia also, although I think Henry and I are a few miles apart.
Just a little bit.
And I'm situated at Drexel's Law School. I'm formerly a social worker who moved into law, who's now, I mean, I've spent more of my career in law really, but have been trying, I think since the beginning, to try to bring more of what I learned and practiced in social work into law in different ways. And that kind of eventually led me to be writing and speaking and trying to promote something I call relational lawyering. And so someone then told me about this task force and said, this sounds like it would be right up your alley. And then I noticed that Kim was involved, and I had already met Kim a number of years ago. So yeah, so I'm a member of the task force, and unfortunately I had to miss a couple calls, although I just listened to the Dominic Barter call, which if anybody, I think you can get access to these calls after the fact. So highly, highly recommend. That was transformative for me. I'd never heard him speak before. So yeah, so I think kudos to Kim for putting together this series. And I'm now going to go back and try to listen to Donna Hicks. That's my next move. So looking forward to hearing more from, Henry and Rhonda, and glad to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. I think that this must be Gary because it's a phone, but it's on mute. Is it Gary?
Now it's back on mute.
Back on mute.
Hello, this is Gary Norman out of Maryland. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. This is Gary Norman out of Maryland. I'm an attorney, a mediator, and a journalist. I have a column in the Maryland Daily Record, which is our major legal newspaper here in Maryland that covers my adventures as a lawyer with a guide dog, talking about animal law, disability law, and dispute resolution, and a lot of public policy dialogue work. Actually, I have the great pleasure of co-presenting with my friend Deborah Hamilton next week at American University, where we'll talk about increasing the pathways to leadership and public service of lawyers and others with disabilities.
Welcome, Gary. I saw Angie come on and leave, and we're going to go ahead without her, but I'll just include Angie in case she comes back on, and I'm going to turn it over to Henry to set the space. Oh, one second. Somebody else just came on the phone.
Hi, everyone. It's Nicole.
Hey, Nicole. Welcome. We just finished introductions. Do you want to say just a sentence or so about yourself?
I'm driving and it's probably really noisy, but I'm just thrilled to be with all of you. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're gonna everybody mute to turn over to Henry, and Henry's gonna set the space and get us started.
So I'm going to invite everyone to, if you can, sit up straight, just bringing your spine into a comfortably tall position. And if you can, bring your feet to touch the floor so that we're all grounded and connected. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to gently close your eyes. And just notice the breath. Notice the colder air entering the nostrils. Notice the warmer air leaving. And I'm going to ask you to consciously make your breath deeper, engaging the chest, the stomach, and even the pelvic floor. And as you breathe, I'm going to ask you to pause as little as possible between the inhale and exhale, letting one seamlessly flow into each other, allowing the breath to move in one smooth, continuous wave. Inhale, transitions to exhale. Exhale, transitions to inhale. And as you're breathing, we're going to use a very simple English four-word phrase to help us focus and literally come into the same space together. And the phrase is, I am here now. So next time you inhale, I'm going to ask you to think of the word I. And then as you exhale, think of the word am. Inhale, here, exhale, now. Inhale, I. Exhale, am. Inhale, here, exhale, now. I am here now. And let's just stay with that for a few moments. Again, being conscious that our chest is open. Being aware that our spine is comfortably tall. Noticing that our feet are touching the ground. And noticing the gentle movement of the breath. I am here now. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite everyone to take a deep breath in through the nose, pausing at the top of the inhale. And then as you exhale through the mouth, gently blinking your eyes open and coming in to the space. And passing it on to Rhonda.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you very much, Henry, for that really delightful moment. I just, before I begin, invite those of us who were able to participate in that practice to just pause and check in with ourselves, sense into the quality of the experience of the moment in this moment, having just had that practice. Bringing the neocortex, right? Bringing our kind of conscious executive brain functioning into this experience, right? We've just had the experience. Now let's consciously kind of reflect on it. There's some reason to believe, based on research and years, well, really millennia of practice, that having those reflective moments on the practicing and then reflecting on the practice can really help solidify in us a sense of commitment to continuing these practices for supporting ourselves, a sense of conscious awareness of what the practices are offering us in the moment. So just bringing that metacognitive moment into this experience, seeing what you might remember, right, from this practice that might support you in the next. So I'm just going to say a few words about a particular relational, let's say, challenge, if you will, that many of us, if not all of us, in some way or another, may have had some experience with. The topic, as you all know, is social identity and bias around social identity as it impacts us in our relationships. And so I want to just kind of pause and allow. So I'll be doing the kind of contemplative, if you will, presentation, inviting a way of presenting that is sort of spacious and invites us to kind of stay present to our bodies as we reflect together on this topic. A little bit of a shift from the traditional kind of head up, right, way in which we as lawyers and academicians and leaders and sort of Western cultures, for sure, and many cultures actually today, are given to typically think about things together, thinking from up here. And I know that there's such a great temptation for us as lawyers to do that. And I'm gonna, very consciously invite us to challenge that with this practice of being in a kind of interpersonal mindfulness as we communicate. So I'm saying we, because I want this to be interactive as soon as possible and to hear from you. And what that will look like will be, again, just pausing as we go to kind of think about what we know about this topic in our own body from our own experiential basis, and infuse as we go that sense of what we know, what each of you know, right, about social identities, first of all, and how those identities may come up in ways that may cause challenges for us in our relationships. And again, so this theme of social identities really invites some reflection. First of all, what do we mean by that? Many of us may be carrying different associations with that idea. I, like Susan, I have a background before law actually in sociology, not social work exactly, but I was in a PhD program in sociology before going into law. And so, so from that sort of area of expertise, I have a way of thinking about social identity that really looks at making a distinction between personal identity, like the personal ways we think of ourselves, our birthday, our name, I'm an introvert, I play the French horn, like all the different, well, haven't played the French horn in a very long time, might like to play it again. But these various ways we think of ourselves individually, personally, on the one hand, that, people may not know unless we share with them. So personal identity on the one hand versus social identity on the other. And personal and social identities can overlap. But social identity invites us to just think a little bit about how it is that people, when they don't know us, might size us up, perceive us without knowing anything more. So really inviting a reflection on what happens in the social realm when human beings come together, how it is that we, in particular places, cultures, and times, have been kind of trained to think about other human beings, other socially cognizable bodies. Ways that people present themselves, right, may be a factor here. So there's some complication in this, but the idea is to simply think about how it is that we've gotten trainings and cues and teachings from our society about how it is that we should perceive, categorize, and actually ultimately even relate to different types of bodies, actually. And what all those differences have been given to represent socially. So for me, that as looking at my body, you can imagine certain types of associations that socially attach to a person who travels through the world in this kind of packaging, right? So part of it is about, let's say, gender, or the way in which, my sort of biological gender, the gender that I was assigned at birth. We now use the term cisgender to refer to this. But the gender that I was assigned at birth as female has a particular kind of way of being perceived by others in the world. You intersect that with this concept called race, which again, we know something about. And so when a person encounters me, all of the different things that we've been trained to quote unquote know about cisgender women and Black people may intersect, right? We may have some sort of way of thinking about the combination of those Black women, right? And so these are the ways in which, in other words, without knowing anything else about me, those kinds of associations in our mind travel with me through the world, and in some ways may be a part or feature of the interpersonal dynamics that arise when I show up in a room. Let me pause and see if that lands with folks. People kind of have a sense of what I'm talking about here. Yeah, some sense. And so it's true for all of us, right? This is true whether we may, this is not to say we don't have any kind of agency around this, because we do. There are many ways we may kind of, seek to disrupt what people might think about us by the way we choose to present ourselves or not, right? But this is just to sort of create some common place for beginning this conversation, which is just to recognize that ideas, teachings, trainings from our culture, which vary quite significantly, right, in time and place, and yet in a broad sort of national context of the United States of America, there are certain themes that are common in some ways about various identities, who matters, what to make of them, and so on and so forth. So this is, this conversation for me opens up to lots of complexity, right? There can be ways that we can vastly oversimplify everything that I'm talking about, which is one, and the risk of that is ever present. And it's one of the reasons why I bring mindfulness and compassion practices so explicitly to bear on any work I ever do, or efforts to sort of reflect together with others about these. Compassion, because I think many of us have been wounded about, in some ways, in our interactions with others, by virtue of ways we have been perceived, or ways we've perceived others that have been reflected back to us that we kind of didn't land well, the reflection when it came back. So there's just so many ways that we carry stuff around these identities, and the ways that we've been in some sort of interaction with others about them. Anybody have a sense of what I'm talking about here? Some stories of a time where we've been misunderstood, misperceived. We thought we were perceiving some person in one way, they took it another. These are the kinds of often buried stories, experiences that can be, again, a hidden dimension in our interactions with others. So part of what I guess I want to suggest is mindfulness and compassion practices can support us in just sort of being more robust and resilient and kind of open to staying in lifelong, or maintaining the lifelong commitments that you all may already have, or else we probably wouldn't be on this call, to keep being open to looking at these aspects of our experience, to kind of stay open to new ways of learning what's going on with us and with others. And I think in this moment, right, 2019, when there's so many different ways that we're being, in various ways, I think, tempted to go back to old stories about who matters and who doesn't, and who we should be, who we should see as our compatriots and our allies and our tribe, right? And who should belong here and who's losing. We're being tempted to kind of, revivify long, old, and divisive narratives around these identities. And messaging around that is showing up all around us. And I will say that as a law professor, I see a lot of young people who are being impacted by these narratives. Often we have a temptation to feel like, because there's reason to believe it and we see it, our young people are kind of beyond this. And in some ways they are, around gender, LGBTQ, IA plus sorts of issues, maybe even in some ways ability disability issues, because there's been such a revolution in terms of support for deeper integration of people with different levels of ability and different ways of using the body. The younger generation, in many ways, our youngest generations are in different, ways more open, let's say, to kind of reflecting on these things. But that doesn't mean that they're immune from these messages about, especially about racism and sexism, that are once again arising in our culture. So I have young people coming into my classes with a lot of questions. For example, young white men who say, I don't have enough people to talk to about these issues, especially race, other than people who want me to kind of get into white nationalism. Like, who else where are the people that I can talk to about questions I have about race? Wanting to not be seen by others as racist, but not knowing how to kind of be in those conversations. So, and I think I'm speaking about those dynamics because I think for us who have been out here, not assuming anything about our generations on the call, but I'll say for me, born in 1967, raised up through the 80s and 90s, this whole notion of color blindness about race, for example, which is just one of the identities, but one that I think is particularly challenging for a lot of us, especially today. Color blindness has counseled a lot of just not talking about these things. And we know, we're starting to realize, if we haven't, right, that we got to talk about these things. And yet, because for decades we didn't, a lot of the young people don't have a lot of good language or even historical knowledge about things that we actually might have more of a purchase on. So I'll kind of, there's so much we could say about these things, so much more, but I know we want this to be really less about me talking and more about all of us sharing. But I'll say that, just one example of how this has shown up in my law classes. I had an Asian American male student who came into class and just had actually he got along great in torts. He kind of took, one of my race law classes, and then there was a kind of a weird opportunity for me to offer another. He took a third class with me, the last two completely voluntarily, and both about race. And the first two classes that were really, we connected very well. The last one, I could tell he was sort of itching to kind of raise some things. And in the class, students were writing papers, and he decided he was going to write a paper about the Rodney King incident. Everybody knows about the Rodney King incident. And so went around the circle. It was a seminar class, and the students were sharing exactly what thesis they might want to explore. And he shared that he wanted to explore the thesis that the beating was deserved. And it was not about racism. And you can imagine I was sort of a little bit taken aback. The idea of the beating being deserved, that videotape still very seared in my own experience as a young law student myself when that tape came out. So the idea that here I would have a young Asian American student basically coming with this particular view, I'll just name that a lot of stuff came up for me. A lot of my own, concerns about where that might be coming from. My own concerns about myself as a Black woman now being perceived by this young Asian American male, whether or not we could find a way to find common ground and a way to communicate about this that would be productive and could be a solidly good learning experience. So I drew on mindfulness, actually, and compassion practices to figure out a way to stay in conversation with him about this, in a deepening conversation. We had 14 weeks together, right, over the semester. And I learned that he had only one other Black female professor ever in his life. And in that prior sole other opportunity to be in a kind of a learning environment with a Black woman, he wanted to do a paper on Rodney King. He mentioned it in class, and she had responded so vehemently negatively that in a way he was just wanting to replay. Not in a way, he later realized over the course of the semester, he kind of just wanted to, he was feeling wounded from that prior experience. And I had brought him into a new opportunity to work with that wound. So this is just one way of sort of saying that these experiences that we have travel with us, and people who remind us of those experiences, consciously or unconsciously, may trigger in us certain kinds of ways of relating that we might not be even wanting to bring forth, and vice versa, of course. Pausing there.
Yeah. Who wants to talk? Just raise your hand. We're now all here where we can see.
Any reflections, thoughts? Again, I just named, there's so many categories. I don't want to limit at all this conversation to race and gender. But I do think drawing our own experience is really important to help us understand the connection with other people's experiences. And so please, if some other dynamic is something you want to mention and bring in, please, please, please.
I appreciate the compassion that you had to allow that student to be with his wound, as you stated, that you had the ability to see that that's what it was. Because it is really easy to see, particularly young ones, that seem to be adopting certain narratives that are disturbing to us, and then to have a sort of natural aversion to that energy. And yet we need to actually keep the dialogue open. We need to keep talking with them, working with them, and not judging them. And I'm saying that as much to myself as I would to anyone else, because I can certainly go on a rant about where culture is going in regard to race and a lot of things. Yeah. But we do have to maintain that place of, well, as you said, mindfulness and compassion to be able to see what's going on in that person. Exactly. You know, I mean, I have relatives who, voted for someone who I consider to be a racist politician, and yet they're my relatives. So why did they do that? What is it that they felt about that person that gave them more confidence than the other person that they could have voted for example? So I'm not going to stop loving the person. And I also see that it's not coming from stupidity. These are smart people. And I'm sure your student is very smart too, but there's other things at work. So I just appreciate your mindfulness and passion with the student. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And by the way, I have a brother who also voted for someone who I didn't. Yeah. So there's a lot. Yeah. We're a lot of us having different aspects of this coming up in our lives. So thank you.
Yeah, my brother too.
Someone who should remain unmentioned.
He who should not be named.
Thank you. Any other reflections or teaching, sharing?
Somewhat humorously, I was imagining how much breathing you had to do to have that conversation.
Yeah, in the moment with the other, 15 students or so, because we all know that when we are in moments like this, especially when you're in a setting where you're not just the two of you or just, a private setting, if it's in any degree public, everybody is watching and everybody is going to learn something or good or bad or neutral in that moment. Something is going to be transmitted there. And so that is actually one of the reasons why I do rely so much on mindfulness and compassion, because I'm aware of the long tail of all of these implications. I know that many of the ways that we are constantly being trained around these things have come in just that way. People have been silently witnessing who we speak to, who we don't, how we speak, the jokes that are told around us, the things that are taught and not taught, right? So the ways that we come to these places of having these issues in our lives are myriad, and they're social. And so, for me, I kind of feel like that we each, if we really care about justice, if we really care about as much as possible, doing as little harm as possible in the world. Bringing awareness to how we interact around these issues is so important. And it's so hard for many of us that, and for me, I will say, has been, that bringing mindfulness and compassion in has just been really the one thing that's made it possible for me to keep growing and keep opening that door well beyond the very, limited things that I was taught about these things growing up in North Carolina in the 70s and 80s, right? And now living in San Francisco, constantly opening the door.
Louise has her hand up. But you're muted, Louise. You have to turn the mute off.
Unmute now.
There you are.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, Rhonda, what you were just saying actually was just what I was going to add, so I'm a little behind at this moment. But, and beginning with the work, Henry, that you just took us through, I've been involved with this group that we're Enneagram personality teachers. And it was really new for me about when I first entered the group about 20 or so years ago, that to be curious about my own personal reactivity in a way that
You're muted again.
Yeah. I'm muted again?
It unmuted just now. It's good now.
Okay. That like the story you just told with your student. I too, I've been a law professor for over a couple decades, and some of my greatest personal challenges have been worked out through my students, on relational practices, and they're in a highly transactional environment, and they're being brainwashed, by the time they're third years into being super adversarial and forgetting themselves and their love of self and love of other and all those pieces. But this group that I've been working with for quite some time now, this Enneagram International group, it was really new for me. Even after I had been teaching for about, I don't know if I just went back in time, maybe I'd been teaching like 4 or 5 years, and then I began my study with this group. But the concept was very new for me to look within when there is personal reactivity. And so the work that you bring us around trauma and things we haven't worked out yet with others, and to bring compassion towards them. And then what you just mentioned about really bringing compassion towards ourselves, that's been, for me personally, my greatest growth edge. And it's constantly edgy. It's just amazing to me. More particularly now, it might be around, my intellectual property, if you will, and the tension around, what it is that you may have created, but what it is you want to put out into the world, right? And so you don't want to claim it as your own because you want others to use it. And I think that has a lot to do with identity. And for me, intellectually as identity. But I just love the idea of looking within and being really curious as to my own wounding. And it oftentimes comes with this, somewhere along the line, there wasn't enough recognition given for something that I knew I had done myself and done really well. And it's probably when I was a really little girl, and it still will bubble up. And of course, around issues of identity, it really can be quite strident internally. So that's what I'll share. And I just thank you so much, because trauma is trauma, and trying to metabolize it over the years is always a work in progress.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Louise. Duncan.
So I want to thank you for your courage and your willingness to be in your own social identity so that I can have the courage to be in mine. And I think that's part of what you're trying to get at here is how important that is. One of the things I struggle with, because I spent so many years as a psychotherapist, is the nature of what I now refer to as relational knowing, which is very different from individual mindfulness. That there was something that you did with your student which has to do with the way you could experience his woundedness and how it resonated with your own, right? And I think that actually is quite different from just the tush on the cushion.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a really different thing. And so I just so appreciate that you're bringing that into your work. My hope is that folks in the law can learn to do that, right? That lawyers are people.
Yes.
Lawyers have their emotional reactions to things. We are not just these cerebral beings who abstract and intellectualize things. That's not what's actually driving the bus. So I just, and if there were more, if there was more that you could say about that, that is just the nature of how it is that you are responding, right? Not just with your compassion, but there was something else you did. Do you understand what I'm referring to? Right? That was like in relationship with your student.
Yes, yes, yes.
That is so central.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for asking and for naming that. And I'm not sure I'll exactly be able to articulate it all or in an effective way in these few minutes that we have. But as a placeholder for something important that we can continue, you all can continue, we all can continue in this work to think about, which is, you know, really refining or having the appetite and the interest and really looking deeply at what's happening in these relationships and in these moments that I call them the sociologists who look at identity and conflict sometimes use the term critical incidents to describe these moments where things can go one way or another, you know. So, you know, these are the things that later become labeled as microaggressions, where someone insulted this person in a way that by asking a question, where are you from, or what are you doing in this building, right? They didn't necessarily mean it to be an insult, but it turned out to have been one. And critical incident, or this student in my engagement in that class, a critical incident. So just to use that concept to help us see that all of us probably have these moments. And when one happens, the temptation can be to go into whatever habits and patterns we have around conflict, around holding our identity and our sense of value, right? Lots of things potentially can happen to make things worse, frankly. Right? There's a lot of potential risks and challenges. And so for me, well, first of all, a lot of what I write about, practice, am here to teach and be with as best I can in the short time that I have on this planet is about intentionally being with others, right? So having a certain kind of intention. You don't just naturally from mindfulness. Actually, it turns out there's research that shows that mindfulness practice can help minimize bias. But there are a lot of people who've come up to me and said, I've practiced for many years. My bias has gone nowhere except maybe gotten worse because I'm more aware of it. Yeah, so I do think having the intention to connect with people and to grow with people and to heal myself and to support other people's healings, to make peace within myself, to support other people in making peace, and to do justice, make amends. There's certain kinds of sort of ethical commitments, frankly, that have then helped orient me to how to relate with people in ways that apprehend there's a pathway to connection. It might be through the woundedness that we have in common, right? It might be through the different ways that we know something about not being seen, not having our voices be heard or appreciated, being disrespected in public, as the student shared with me he felt like he had been, you know. But it took, so there's the pre-work of wanting to be that person, because, you know, in the moment, it won't necessarily naturally just arise. But if you decide this is the kind of person I want to be in relationship to another person who might trigger me and who might, you know, say some things that actually I find really, really troubling. But if I really just want to be present, I've personally worked to develop that capacity to draw on the resources, mindfulness or other, you know, taking a deep breath that grounds me literally to the sense of being here now, reconnects me with the values and aspirations that I carry about wanting to be in connection, and enables me to try to work with ways of physically being in that relational dynamic with those intentions very present. And so it looks differently. You know, recently I was in a circle at a university where I was called in to consult around an issue, an incident, a racist incident that had happened on campus. I got called to kind of help create space for processing it. And a comment came up. You know, a person said, you know, from her experience as a Latina, she often struggles on campus. She's, you know, do people see her? And she's a person with some status, but nevertheless was speaking about feeling that the space wasn't always respectful and all of that. This is a young Latina, older white male. I don't see you as Latina. A lot of reactivity. That's being colorblind. I would like you to see that I struggle here, right? You misunderstood me. The whole thing was about to go like that. How many of us have seen things like this happen in our... It's so painful. I laugh because it's so human now, right? But yet we all like, no, I don't want to make a mistake. And we're all like, don't want to be vulnerable, don't want to be called out. Can we breathe, first of all? And so when something like this happens, as again, you know, will happen, access that will to turn toward, and to turn toward with compassion, to speak it. Sometimes we don't know what to say, but to say, I'm not sure how, but I want to stay in connection with you as we figure out what just happened here. And, you know, I mean, I don't think there's any one way to do these things, but you know, the book that I wrote is just about this, how to bring these practices and commitments and self-reflection and self-compassion and looking at our history and seeing a long arc that our life is picking up something, and really just, we got a dash between some dates and it's going to be a short while on this planet. How do we want to live? Right? And how do we want to live in ways that help redeem the past, help create some new patterns for the future? Yeah.
So there's so much more to say, including I have more to say, but I want to honor people's time and let Henry close, and then I'm available to stick around for longer, but I'll turn off the recording when Henry has closed us.
Thank you all. Thank you for everything, for being here.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Well, thank you, Rhonda. Such an important conversation. And in the closing, I would like to build a little bit on the identity, but approach it from a slightly different perspective. Because for me, my experience has been I am able to respond instead of reacting when my identity is challenged. When there is just a little bit of space between my identity and me. And that realization that I am not just the identity or the identities that I carry. So I would like to invite us to engage in just a very short exercise on creating that space between the identity and us. So in just a few moments, I'll give you the instructions first and then we'll practice together. So in just a few moments, I'll ask you to close your eyes. And then just bringing into your awareness whatever is the first identity you have it. Maybe I'm a lawyer, I'm a mother, I am, you know, your ethnicity, whatever it is, just whatever comes into your awareness. And then I'm going to invite you to ask yourself a question. Am I just that? Don't worry about the answer. Don't try to answer. And after that, instead of answering, we will do a very brief Sanskrit mantra called So-Ham. And So-Ham translates as I am that which is infinite, that I am. So if we can all just gently close our eyes, again, wherever you are, making your spine comfortably straight. And just whatever is the first identity that comes into your awareness, don't try to analyze it, don't try to intellectualize it. Just ask yourself this question, am I just that? Don't worry about the answer, don't worry what arises. And then as you inhale, think of the word so, and as you exhale, think of the word hum. And next identity, next role, next thing that you would describe yourself as, whatever is arising. If you can just bring that into your awareness for just a moment and ask yourself, am I just that? Again, don't worry about the answer. As you inhale, think of the word so. And as you exhale, think of the word hum. And practicing one more piece of your identity that maybe arises for you, without trying to analyze it, without trying to think too much about it. Just ask yourself this question: am I just that? And instead of focusing on the answer, as you inhale, think of the word so. And as you exhale, think of the word hum. And if we can, all together, let's just stay with so, hum. So, hum. Inhaling so, exhaling hum. So, hum. So, hum. And letting go of the mantra. Just feeling that space within you. Space that doesn't need a label, identification. Space that is just ever present there. Surrender to this space. And when you're ready, taking a deep inhale and holding the breath at the top, focusing your eyes gently at the third eye. And as you exhale, gently blinking your eyes open and coming back into our space.